The single biggest mistake that any FTC robotics team can make in the first week is misunderstanding the game manual. End of Teleop. It doesn't count for both. One misunderstood rule could derail your entire robot's design and your season strategy. That's why in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into every single way that you can possibly score a point in the DECODE season. Understanding how to score points from day one is the foundational set for any successful season. I'm Coach Pratt, and I've taught robotics and design for over 10 years. I've mentored FTC teams to national championship wins and multiple Inspire awards. I know that understanding how the scoring system works is the bedrock for a successful season. So today, I'm going to run you through the 4 ways that you can score points in the autonomous period, the 7 ways that you can score points in the Teleop period, and I'll point out some really critical rules clarifications that you may have missed inside the manual. I'll also raise a few questions about things that might not be clear in the manual and we'll need a bit more understanding of from some head refs and team updates in the future. So let's get a detailed breakdown of the scoring here. We're going to break this up into scoring for autonomous and then breaking up for scoring for Teleop. So in autonomous, there are 4 different ways that you can score points in the DECODE season. The first one is scored at the end of the autonomous period, and that counts as leaving one of the launching zones. So when you start, you have to have your robot somewhere in the launching zone or one of the 2 different launching zones. And you have to be on this field perimeter or on the goal. So you can either be touching the goal or touching the field perimeter. Now, in order to get 3 points, you have to leave the launching zone at the end of autonomous. So autonomous runs from that 0 to 30 seconds. So as long as you can have a simple program that simply moves you to the right or moves you to the left, depending on where you are, you get outside that, that's 3 points right there. So that's one way to score. The second way to score is with artifacts. And artifacts actually have 2 different ways that you can score in autonomous. The same is true of inside Teleop. Now you can either score 3 points for launching them inside of the goal, and that if it goes through the square, so it has to go into the goal and then through this square, that counts as a classified artifact or a classified ball. And that will give you 3 points in the autonomous period per ball. So there's 6 balls that just went in here. Of course, 3 times 6, that would be 18 points. Now, if you happen to fill up 9 inside here, every single one that goes over is an additional 1 point. That's the third way to score, is by getting into the goal and letting it roll over top of the previous ones. The last way to score in autonomous is with the pattern matching section. So this is referring to the balls within the ramp here. So in this case, this would be green, purple, 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 green, purple, purple, green. So there are 3 sections of 3 indexes inside. So there's 9 indexes altogether, and each one counts as 3. At the start of the autonomous period, you have that obelisk, that little triangular piece. It's going to randomly tell you, once you have your robot set up with the pieces already inside, it's going to randomly select either green, purple, 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 green, purple, or purple, purple, green, depending on the April tag that shows up. And then you need to get those artifacts inside to count for classification. Now, each artifact ball counts an additional 2 points. So they already give an example here, where if the pattern was green, purple, purple, these 2 would not count for additional 2, but this one does count for additional 2. So this would score for 3, this would score for 3, whereas index 3 would score for 5 points in total. So those are the 4 ways that you can score in your autonomous period. Leaving for 3 points, getting a classified ball in the goal and through the square is 3 points, overflowing, getting it through the goal and over top, or actually not even through the goal, just getting it up the goal and then over top of the ramp counts as 1 point, and then 2 points additionally for each ball that is correctly classified. Now, one thing that we need clarity on for the autonomous period is right here. Assessment of artifacts are either classified or overflow occurs during the match and continues till all come to rest at the conclusion of the match. Artifacts scored after the end of auto are assessed as part of Teleop. And then assessment of the auto pattern scoring occurs at the end of auto. And one thing that's not clear here is, does that count for balls that are on the ramp? Is it the full 5 points, 3 points for the classified and an additional 2 points on the ramp? Or is it just the 2 points for the pattern because it's matched that pattern? And this is a pretty big swing because if it's just the points for the pattern, that's an 18-point swing. But if it's the points for the ball and the pattern, that's a 45-point swing. So we need some rules clarification on where that's going to go in the future on autonomous. Now for Teleop, there are 7 different ways to score. The first one is, of course, the artifacts. Same thing as before, just like in auto, if you get points in, or if you get an artifact into the goal and it rolls through that square classifier, counts as 3 points. Anything that overflows counts as 1 point. So those are 2 ways you can score inside of Teleop. And those are going to be the most common, the quickest points. You also score the pattern points. Now keep in mind the pattern points for Teleop are scored at the end of the match. So it doesn't matter if you had the pattern during auto. You could keep that whole pattern if you wanted to, but you will score that pattern again, depending on what you currently have inside of that ramp in front of that gate at the end of Teleop. So that is the third way you can score. Another one is the depot. And the depot refers to, by your goal, there's this white taped line. If at the end of the match, once the artifacts are no longer rolling and the robots are no longer moving, if you have any artifacts touching that back white line on the goal, that also counts as 1 point. So this is a bit of a push bot. It doesn't matter if a robot is contacting it either. So you could have a robot pushed up against that goal and forcing them against that to be able to keep those artifacts against that goal. That would count as 1 point. It doesn't matter as long as they're just on there. Now keep in mind, if they rolled off slightly, doesn't count on that. So that is 1 point, and that is the fourth way you can get points in Teleop. Now there are 3 ways to score points in Endgame. Keep in mind, Endgame this season is only 20 seconds. It's not 30 seconds like it was in last year's season for Into the Deep. And you get 5 points for being partially returned to the base. But let's talk about what that actually means for actually on the base. So the base itself is an 18-inch square in the bottom of your field here. And partially supported means that any part of your robot is overlapping the tape line itself. Yeah, because I believe that the edge of the tape is 18 inches for this cube. So as long as any part of your robot is touching the field tile, that counts as partially supported. Fully returned means your robot is wholly within this 18-inch. So partially supported is 5 points, wholly within is 10 points. And then if you can have 2 robots fully returned to that base, which means you have 1 robot on top of another, that's an additional 10 points. So that doesn't mean 20 points though, that actually means 30 points. So if you have 1 robot on the base, a second robot on top of that base, that's an additional 10 points. It's 30 points in total, not just 20 for that endgame. Also keep in mind that this endgame is at the start of the buzzer, not at the end of the buzzer like it was at previous points. So you have to be completely in there motionless at the start of that final buzzer. Now the last thing I want to talk about in scoring is the qualifier ranking points. This is a big change to FTC this season. So you've got 4 ways in total to score on auto, 7 ways in total to score on Teleop. And the way that you advance through the rankings has shifted a ton for ranking points. Previously, if you won the game, you got 2 ranking points. If it was a tie, you got 1 ranking point. If you lost, you got nothing. Now, there are ways for you to score points even if you didn't happen to win your match, which is a great change, and I'm a big fan of this. If you win, you get 3 ranking points. If you tie, you get 1 ranking point. If you lose, of course, you get none. It is possible to get 6 ranking points each match. So even if you lose a match, you can still get 3 ranking points. And the key point here is that ranking points only count in the qualification rounds. Then, whoever team has the highest average ranking points across all their qualification matches will be the highest team for qualifiers. They'll get 16 points, then 15 points, 14 points, all the way down to 2 points for the team that has the lowest ranking points. But keep in mind, it is not total ranking points. It's your highest average number of ranking points across your matches. There are 3 ways you can also score ranking points that are completely separate from the points that are scored inside the match itself for either win or lose. The first one is your movement ranking points. That's your combined leave and base points. So this is both autonomous at the end of the autonomous period and at the end of the Teleop period. It changes depending on where we are in the season. For your qualifier tournament, it's 16 points. For your regional championship, that will qualify you for a first championship or a premier event, it's 21 points. Now, what does this 16 points look like? What does it actually mean? Well, the easiest way to do this, there are about 3 ways you can accomplish this. The first is that if both robots leave the targeting area or that launching area, and one robot is fully returned to the base, that is 16 points. That earns you a ranking point. Alternatively, you could have 2 robots partially returned to the base and partly supported, and 2 robots having left. That would be 16 points. That would satisfy that criteria. You could also have 2 robots fully within the base. That would count there. For your regional championships, if both robots leave and one robot is fully returned to the base and one robot is partially returned, again, that could even be a wheel or even a zip tie that's overlapping and being supported on that field tile, that would be 21 points. That would count for a movement ranking point. For a goal ranking point, it's the number of artifacts scored through the square at or above the threshold. Now, the pattern ranking point is pattern points earned at or above the threshold. And this one is a little bit more challenging, that on average, you'd have to have 4.5 balls correct through the entire pattern in order to be able to get up this ranking point. At the start of the season, though, what that means is in autonomous, if you can just get 9 purples all the way across, you know you're going to have at least 6 of the 9 correct in that pattern. So 6 times 2, that is 12. You would only have to get 3 correct again. So in autonomous, as long as you got a few balls in there on purple, that would also count you towards that pattern recognition. Just out of simple probabilities, on average, you're going to get a few of those patterns correct, even by sheer random chance. So at the start, just throw a bunch of balls in if you can't keep a track of that pattern, because likely if they're all purple, you've got a good chance of actually just matching that pattern just by pure randomness in that. So these ranking points change quite a bit for how that goes. That also means your team's likely going to have a different strategy for the qualifiers versus for the playoffs, because for the playoffs, these 3 things don't matter anymore, and now what matters is simply just a win or lose double elimination tournament. So going back over those rules recap really quick. In autonomous, if you leave, it's 3. That's a big one. It counts towards that movement point. 3 points if it goes through that square, 1 point if it overrules on top. Your pattern is an additional 2 points per correct ball, but that pattern is only scored at the end of autonomous and at the end of Teleop. It doesn't count for both. We do need a rules clarification on what that one specific rule says. That says it was 10.5 and is specifically artifacts scored after the end of auto are assessed as part of Teleop. So does that mean balls that are in the air? Does that mean that current pattern points are counted as double? Does that mean that the ball on the ramp counts as double? Does that mean that the pattern counts again? I'm not sure what that ends up meaning. Obviously, if you get rid of the pattern, does that mean you're going to remove those points of the pattern? I'm not sure. So we need some rule clarification on what that looks like. When it comes to the Teleop, there's 7 different ways to score. Of course, you can still classify and non-classify, but overflow your artifacts. You can get 1 point in the depot at the end of the match, as long as you push something in. That might be a good way if you happen to miss a ball just by chumping something in at the end. The pattern is also scored at the end of Teleop. And again, this partially supported means you just have a wheel inside of that base. So you could have 1 robot fully inside or 2 robots just slightly parked on side at an angle. It doesn't really matter where they go. That would still be enough for 10 points. And then do not forget about your ranking points. Trying to get these 3, again, especially at qualifying tournaments, that pattern ranking point is going to be good enough, just in my opinion, to throw in all purple balls randomly, or even just throw enough random balls, and you will likely have enough random selection, provided you get all 9 in there, to be able to get enough points. Now, keep in mind, on those ranking points, we are going to get team updates for where the actual points are going to be. And I think this is a good choice from first to be able to let us know how much harder the season is going to go based on where teams are at around the world. I hope you enjoyed that detailed score breakdown. If I made any mistakes or any clarifications, let us know in the comments down below so that other teams can also benefit from your knowledge. Otherwise, best of luck out there this season.